ballroom glittered, but for Cordelia Rosier it was a slaughterhouse. One word, one accusation, and her life was over. The tun turned, a pack of wolves sensing blood. Her dress was torn, her name in tatters. Humiliation fell like a shroud, heavy and cold. And then, from the shadows, the most dangerous man in all of England, the ruthless Duke of Wyndham, began to move. He wasn't moving to help. He was moving to claim the wreckage. London, 1837. The city was a frantic whirl of noise, smoke, and ambition, energized by the coronation of a new, young queen. For the aristocracy, it meant a new season of possibilities. For Cordelia Rosier, it meant the end of the line. She stood behind the heavy velvet curtain of her aunt's cramped Mayfair drawing room, watching the carriages pass. They were all heading to Lansdowne House for the first great ball of the season, a ball she was meant to attend. "Cordelia, stop lurking," snapped her aunt, Lady Matilda Ashworth. Matilda was a woman perpetually on the verge of a nervous collapse, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. "You will wrinkle the fabric." The fabric in question was a pale lemon silk, a gown that had been her mother's. It had been refashioned so many times it practically sighed with exhaustion. The lace at the cuffs was mended, the hemline was a shade too high for the current fashion, and it smelled faintly of lavender and desperation. "It is already wrinkled, Aunt," Cordelia said, her voice quiet. "Don't be impertinent. We do not have the luxury of impertinence. We barely have the luxury of this house." This was true. Cordelia was the orphan of Robert Rosier, a man whose name was now spoken only in whispers of ruin and disgrace. She was the poor relation, the penniless niece of Baron Ashworth, a man who had already drunk and gambled away his own modest fortune, and was now rapidly consuming what was left of his wife's. This ball was their last, desperate throw of the dice. Cordelia was the stake. "You must be amiable, Cordelia," her aunt stressed, pulling at her own tight gloves. "Mr. Edmund Lyle has shown an interest. He is only a second son, but his father is a viscount. It is more than we could hope for." Cordelia nodded, her stomach churning. She knew the plan. She was to be amiable, to bat her eyelashes, to secure a proposal from anyone before the creditors finally seized the house and threw them onto the street. She was not a person. She was a solution to a debt. "And stay away from Lady Honoria Wrexham," her aunt added as a fearful afterthought. She knows people. Honoria Wrexham. The name landed in the room like a dollop of poison. Honoria was everything Cordelia was not, dazzlingly beautiful, titanically wealthy, and singularly, spectacularly cruel. Her father, Lord Wrexham, was a titan of industry and finance. Strangely, he had been Cordelia's own father's business partner once. Before the fall, when they arrived at Lansdowne House, the crush of humanity was overwhelming. The glitter of jewels and the scent of expensive perfume filled the air. Cordelia felt like a sparrow that had flown into a hall of mirrors. She instinctively clutched the only valuable thing she owned, a small silver locket from her mother, hidden beneath her bodice. They made their bows. Lady Ashworth immediately propelled Cordelia toward the dance floor, her eyes scanning the crowd for Mr. Lyle. But it was Honoria Wrexham who found them first. She was a vision in sapphire blue, a cascade of diamonds at her throat. She glided toward them, her smile as sharp and bright as a shard of glass. "Lady Ashworth. And Miss Rosier, is it?" Honoria's voice was light, musical, and carried perfectly. "Lady Honoria." Matilda curtsied low, her smile trembling. Honoria's gaze raked over Cordelia, from her too simple hair to her mended hem. "What a charming gown, Miss Rosier. Such a lovely, delicate silk. My goodness, it must be an antique." "It was my mother's," Cordelia said, her chin lifting. She would not be cowed. "A family heirloom. How precious. Honoria leaned in, as if sharing a secret. You must be so careful with it. Old fabrics can be so fragile. One sudden move, and the whole thing might just disintegrate. A small titter of laughter rose from the sycophants surrounding Honoria. Cordelia felt the blood rush to her cheeks, a hot tide of shame. "If you will excuse us," Matilda stammered, grabbing Cordelia's arm. "Oh, but you must not," Honoria said, placing a hand on Cordelia's other arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "The night is just beginning, and I do believe I see Mr. Lyle looking for you. He is so kind, isn't he? Always so charitable to those less fortunate." She steered Cordelia toward the edge of the dance floor, her smile never wavering. Cordelia felt trapped, a specimen pinned to a board. The humiliation was already beginning, a slow, suffocating burn. She looked for an escape, but all she saw were the glittering, merciless eyes of the Tun, all watching, all waiting. And in the shadows, near the grand staircase, she caught a glimpse of a man. He was separate from the crowd, dressed in severe black, his presence a void of silence in the noisy room. He was tall, his features harsh and angular, and he was watching the scene with an air of profound, chilling boredom. He was a stranger to her, yet instantly recognizable. Maximilian Valerius, the Duke of Wyndham. The Wolf of Wyndham, they called him. A man who had inherited a ruined dukedom and, through sheer, ruthless will, rebuilt it into an empire, crushing anyone who stood in his path. He was the wealthiest, most powerful, and most feared bachelor in England. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. His held no pity, no interest, nothing. He looked away, and Cordelia's attention was forced back to Honoria, who was now patting her arm. There, my dear. We will find you a partner. Even a charity case deserves one dance." The orchestra struck up a new waltz. Mr. Edmund Lyle, bless his kind, simple heart, materialized at Cordelia's elbow, saving her from Honoria's claws. "Miss Rosier," he bowed, his face open and earnest. "May I have the honor?" Cordelia gave him a smile that was, for the first time that night, genuine. "I would be delighted, Mr. Lyle." As he led her onto the floor, she felt a moment of reprieve. Edmund Lyle was not a brilliant man, but he was a good one. He spoke of poetry and his struggles with his Greek translation, and he did not once look at her dress with pity or disdain. For 3 glorious minutes, she was not poor Cordelia Rosia. She was just a young woman at a ball. It was this, more than anything, that sealed her fate. Honoria Wrexham did not like to see charity cases looking happy. When the waltz ended, Mr. Lyle escorted her back to her aunt. But Honoria was waiting, a small knot of her friends gathered around her. She held 2 glasses of champagne. "Oh, Miss Rosier, you look quite flushed," Honoria purred. "You must be thirsty. A celebration, perhaps, for capturing Mr. Lyle's attention so thoroughly." I am not thirsty, thank you," Cordelia said, trying to step around her. "Nonsense." Honoria pushed one of the glasses toward her. "We must toast to new acquaintances." The music swelled again, and a passing couple jostled Honoria. She stumbled, and the contents of both champagne glasses, sticky, golden, and ruinously expensive, arced through the air and splashed directly down the front of Cordelia's lemon silk gown. A collective, horrified gasp echoed through the ballroom. The music faltered. Cordelia froze, the cold liquid seeping through the thin fabric, sticking to her skin. The front of her bodice was soaked, the delicate silk turning a dark, ugly amber. "Oh dear!" Honoria shrieked, her hand flying to her mouth in mock horror. "Oh, you clumsy, clumsy girl! You've knocked the glasses from my hand." I didn't," Cordelia stammered, looking down at the ruin of her mother's dress. "Look at this. You've ruined my gown as well," Honoria cried, pointing to a few drops on her own sapphire skirt, which were already being dabbed away by her friends. "I am so dreadfully sorry, Lady Honoria." Matilda Ashworth rushed forward, her face white with panic, dabbing at Cordelia with a tiny, useless lace handkerchief. "She is so terribly sorry." "Sorry?" Honoria's voice dropped its fake sympathy, becoming sharp and cold. The crowd was pressing in now, a circle of condemnation. "Sorry will not mend this, will it? But then, her kind is used to causing ruin and simply walking away, aren't they?" A new, deeper silence fell. This was no longer about a spilled drink. "What do you mean?" Cordelia asked, her voice a whisper. "What do I mean?" Honoria laughed, a high, brittle sound. "I mean your name, girl. Rosier. Does no one here remember? This is the daughter of Robert Rosier." The name, spoken aloud, had the effect of a bomb. Murmurs erupted. Rosier? The Bengal shipping collapse? Heavens, I thought they'd fled the country. "Yes!" Honoria's voice rose, triumphant. She was playing to the crowd, her face flushed with righteous malice. "The very man, the swindler who co-founded the Bengal Shipping Company, took my father's investment, took everyone's investment, and fled with the profits, leaving thousands ruined." "That is a lie," Cordelia cried, finding her voice. "My father was an honest man." "An honest man?" Honoria advanced on her. "My mother lost her entire dowry because of him. The Lyle family," she gestured to a pale-faced Edmund, "lost their Irish estates. He was a thief, a charlatan, and a coward. And you come here," she suddenly grabbed the shoulder of Cordelia's dress, "in your mother's mended rags, trying to trick an honest man into marriage, trying to infect a good family with your filthy name." With a vicious tug, Honoria yanked the fabric. The old silk, stressed by the mending and weakened by the champagne, did not just tear. It shredded. The sound of ripping fabric was louder than a gunshot in the silent room. The entire sleeve and half the bodice tore away, exposing Cordelia's shoulder and the simple cotton chemise beneath. Humiliation fell over her. It was not a gentle mist. It was a physical weight, a shroud of ice and fire that stole her breath. The gasps, the whispers, the unveiled stares, they were daggers. She stood, half-dressed and exposed, her father's name defiled, her mother's dress destroyed. She was ruined, utterly. In a single calculated moment, Honoria Wrexham had executed her. Matilda Ashworth gave a small, strangled sob and fainted dead away. Mr. Lyle looked like he wanted to help, but was rooted to the spot by sheer horror. The circle of onlookers tightened, a pack of wolves that had tasted blood. They were staring, leering, whispering. Cordelia's life in London was over. And then the pack parted. A silence of a different kind fell. Not of shock, but of fear. Maximilian Valerius, the Duke of Wyndham, was moving. He descended the short staircase from the alcove he had occupied, his steps unhurried. He cut through the crowd, which recoiled from him as if from a plague. He did not look at Honoria. He did not look at the fainting Lady Ashworth. He walked directly to the centre of the circle, to the spot where Cordelia Rosier stood, trembling and exposed. He stopped a foot from her. His eyes, the colour of a winter sea, met hers. He said nothing. Slowly, deliberately, he began to unbutton his own immaculate black evening coat. It was an act of such strange intimacy that the crowd held its collective breath. He slid the coat from his broad shoulders. It was heavy, lined with silk, and still warm from his body. He did not offer it to her. He did not ask. He stepped forward and, with a swift, impersonal efficiency, wrapped the enormous coat around her trembling shoulders, covering her from her neck to her knees. He tucked the lapels closed, his knuckles brushing the locket at her throat. The humiliation was still there, but it was now shielded by the most expensive wool in England. He turned his head, his profile sharp as an axe, and looked at Honoria Wrexham. His voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor. "You will find, Lady Honoria," he said, "that you have just insulted the future Duchess of Wyndham. A bomb, a cannonade, a total cessation of all natural law. The ballroom, which had been paralyzed by Cordelia's humiliation, was now shattered by the Duke's pronouncement. Honoria Wrexham's face, moments before flushed with victory, turned a mottled, chalky white. The whispers that had been so cruel were now just breathless, disbelieving gasps. "Your Grace, I did not," Honoria stammered, her power evaporating. Wyndham did not even grant her a full glance. His focus was on Cordelia. His expression was unreadable. It was not kind. It was not gentle. It was possessive. It was the look of a man who had just purchased an extremely valuable, albeit damaged, piece of property. "Come," he said to Cordelia. It was not a request. He placed his hand not on her elbow, as protocol demanded, but firmly on the small of her back, over the heavy wool of his coat. The gesture was one of ownership. He began to propel her forward, straight through the stunned crowd. "But my aunt," Cordelia whispered, her mind reeling. She looked back at the crumpled form of Lady Ashworth, who was just beginning to be tended to by a frantic Mr. Lyle. "She will be seen to," the Duke said, his voice a low rumble near her ear. "She is the least of your concerns." They walked. The Tun parted for them like the Red Sea. The most powerful gossips, the dowagers known as the patronesses of Almack's, women who could destroy a reputation with a single raised eyebrow, and were, in fact, associates of the famed Lady Jersey, were rendered mute. They were watching a god walk among mortals, and he was taking the sacrificial lamb with him. Cordelia kept her head high, though she wanted to dissolve. The walk from the center of the ballroom to the grand entrance was the longest of her life. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her back, on the torn silk peeking from beneath the Duke's coat, on the Duke's proprietary hand. At the entrance, Wyndham's head footman, a man who seemed to have materialized from the shadows, was already holding the door, the Duke's ducal crest visible on his livery. "My carriage," Wyndham ordered. "It is already here, Your Grace." The cold night air hit Cordelia's face, a shocking contrast to the overheated ballroom. The Duke did not release her. He guided her down the steps, past the rows of link boys and carriage men, all of whom were staring. He bundled her into the dark, impossibly luxurious carriage, the door shutting behind them with the solid, final thud of a vault. The carriage lurched into motion. They sat in silence. The carriage was cavernous, upholstered in dark leather that smelled of money and power. The only light came from the gas lamps they passed, which intermittently illuminated the Duke's harsh, severe face. He was staring at her. Not with pity, not with lust. It was an assessment. Cordelia's mind was racing, trying to catch up. "Your Grace, what you said, you cannot be serious." "I'm always serious, Miss Rosier." "But why? You don't know me. You saw what happened. I am ruined. My name is—" "Yes," he interrupted, his voice smooth and cold. "Your name is Rosier. That is precisely the point." Cordelia frowned. "I don't understand. Lady Honoria was right. My father, the scandal. Lady Honoria, the Duke said, is a fool. She repeated a story that she only half understands. A story that she, of all people, should have kept her mouth shut about. The carriage turned a corner, leaving the noise of Mayfair for the quieter, more imposing squares of St. James. "You saved me," Cordelia whispered, the shock finally giving way to a bone-deep tremor. "I don't know how to thank you. You saved me from all of that." The Duke shifted. The lamplight caught the hard planes of his face. He leaned forward, and for the first time, Cordelia felt a genuine flicker of fear. This was not a savior. This was the Wolf of Wyndham. "Do not mistake me, Miss Rosier," he said, his voice soft, yet more menacing than any shout. "I did not save you. I claimed you." "What? What do you mean?" "I saw a thing I wanted, and I took it. Your humiliation was merely a convenience. It made you affordable." Cordelia recoiled as if he had slapped her. "Affordable? You were a penniless orphan with a stained name, about to be thrown onto the street. Now, you are the fiancée of a duke, a title, Miss Rosier, that I have just this night bestowed upon you in front of 200 of the most important people in England. It is a title you will accept." The carriage slowed, not in front of her aunt's modest house, but before the most imposing mansion in the square. Wyndham House. It was a fortress of pale stone, dark and silent. "This is not a proposal," the Duke continued, as his footman opened the door. "A proposal implies you have a choice." He stepped out and then turned, offering her his hand. It was not a gentlemanly courtesy. It was a command. "This, Miss Rosier, is a contract, and you have already been signed." She stared at his offered hand, then at the looming, shadowed mansion. She had been saved from one form of ruin, only to be delivered, bound and gagged, to another. Humiliation had fallen over her at the ball. But as she placed her trembling hand in the Duke's, she realized the ruthless Duke had not moved to stop her fall. He had simply moved to be the one to catch her at the bottom. The great hall of Wyndham House was a tundra of black and white marble. Their footsteps echoed in the cavernous silence, a silence made louder by the half-dozen footmen who stood like statues, their faces blank. They did not look at Cordelia. They did not look at anything. A severe, grey-haired woman in a black bombazine dress appeared. "Your Grace," she said, her voice a dry rustle. "An unexpected development?" "Mrs. Pike," the Duke said. "This is Miss Rosier. She will be staying. Have the rose suite prepared, and send brandy and a light supper to my study." "Very good, Your Grace." Mrs. Pike's gaze flickered to Cordelia, taking in the ripped dress, the enormous coat, the tear tracks on her cheeks. It was a look of pure, unadulterated inventory. Cordelia was a problem to be managed. "I will not be," Cordelia began, but the Duke's hand was on her back again, propelling her past the housekeeper. "You will," he said, guiding her down a corridor lined with portraits of his ancestors, all of whom seemed to be scowling at her. The study was the first room she had seen that felt lived in. It was walled with books, floor to ceiling. A massive fire roared in the grate, but it did little to warm the chill in the air. "Take off the coat," he ordered, walking to a decanter on a heavy mahogany desk. Cordelia hesitated, then let the heavy coat slide from her shoulders, revealing the full ruin of her gown. She felt naked, exposed again. She clutched the coat to her chest like a shield. He turned, a glass of brandy in his hand, and his eyes raked over her. He nodded, as if confirming a thought. Yes, that is precisely what she would do. Honoria W. "Your Grace," Cordelia interrupted, her voice shaking but firm. "You must tell me what is happening. You said, contract. You said my name was the point. What does my father's scandal have to do with you?" He handed her the brandy. "Drink it. It's not a request." You're in shock." She took a sip. The fiery liquid burned a path down her throat, but it stopped her hands from shaking. He poured one for himself and stood before the fire, his back to the flames, a dark silhouette of power. "The Bengal Shipping Company," he said. "Founded 1817. The two managing directors were Lord Wrexham and your father, Robert Rosier. They were the architects. They sourced the investors." "I know this," Cordelia said. "And my father was blamed when it failed." "He was," the Duke agreed, taking a slow sip. "But he was not the only one. The primary investor, the man who sank half his fortune into their enterprise, was my father. The 5th Duke of Wyndham." Cordelia's blood ran cold. I never knew." "Of course you didn't. It was the great, unspoken shame of my house. When the company collapsed, when Wrexham and Rosier declared bankruptcy and all assets vanished, it destroyed my father. Not just his finances, his name, his will to live." He stared into the fire. He sat in this very chair. He put a pistol in his mouth and pulled the trigger. "I was 17. Cordelia sank into a chair, the brandy glass slipping from her fingers. It hit the thick rug with a dull thud. "Oh, my heavens!" "I inherited a title," he continued, his voice devoid of all emotion, "mountains of debt and a reputation for ruin. I have spent the last 15 years clawing back every penny, every acre. I have rebuilt this house, stone by stone, on the bones of my competitors. I have made Wyndham a name of power again, not of pity." "But Wrexham," Cordelia whispered. Honoria said, "He was the victim." "Wrexham," the Duke spat, the first flash of emotion she'd seen, "is a snake. He's a liar. He cried victim louder than anyone, and in the confusion he managed to profit. He used the collapse to buy up other, smaller investors' debts for pennies on the pound. He rebuilt his fortune on the wreckage he helped create. But he was not the mastermind." He turned, his full, terrifying focus landing on her. "Your father was." "No!" Cordelia leapt to her feet. "That is not true. He was a good man. He was meticulous. He was honest. He was a brilliant accountant, Miss Rosier, a genius with numbers. And he was the one who held the ledgers. Wrexham was the face, the salesman. Your father was the architect. He designed the fraud. He knew where every single penny was, and he made it all disappear. I don't believe you. I don't care." He walked to his desk. "When your father disappeared after the scandal, he took his records with him, the real ones, the ones that detailed the entire scheme. For 15 years I have searched for those ledgers. They are the key. They not only prove the fraud, they show where the money went. They are my key to destroying Wrexham, once and for all. He has hidden behind his victim status for too long." He was pacing now, a caged wolf. "I have wanted 2 things in my life, Miss Rosier. The first was to restore my family's power. I have done that. The second is to see Lord Wrexham in Newgate Prison, and his harridan of a daughter selling herself on the street." He stopped in front of her. "And you, Miss Rosier, are the key to the second." "Me? I have nothing. My father is dead. We live in poverty. Look at me." "Exactly. You are his only heir. You are his blood. He would have left his secrets with you, or at least left them for you. A journal, a locked box, a key to a bank vault, something. You have it, even if you don't know it." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This is the bargain. You will marry me. You will become the Duchess of Wyndham. You will have wealth you cannot imagine, protection no one can breach. Your aunt and uncle will be pensioned off, sent to the country where they cannot embarrass us. You will be untouchable." "And in return?" she breathed, though she already knew the answer. "In return," he said, his eyes glittering, "you will tear down your father's house, search the floorboards, and you will find me those ledgers. You will give me the weapon I need to finish this. You will give me my justice." "And if I refuse?" The Duke smiled. It was a terrible, chilling sight. "If you refuse, then I will walk you to the front door. I will publicly retract my proposal. I will tell the Tun I was mistaken, that I was overcome with pity for a moment. You will be affordable again." He gestured to the window, to the dark street outside. "You will be the laughing stock of London, the girl who was so ruined, not even the Wolf of Windham would have her. You will be cast out. Your aunt will be in debtor's prison by morning. You will be on the street, and Lady Honoria Wrexham will be there to laugh as you go." He offered his hand again. "So, Miss Rosier, do we have a contract?" She looked at his hand. She thought of her aunt. She thought of Honoria's triumphant, sneering face, and she thought of her father, the man she remembered as kind and gentle, now painted as a master criminal. I will do it," she said, her voice hoarse, "but not for the money." "Oh?" He raised an eyebrow. "If you are wrong, if those ledgers prove my father's innocence, you will clear his name, as publicly as you have claimed me." The Duke stared at her for a long moment, a flicker of something in his eyes. "Respect? You have a spine, Miss Rosier. I will give you that. Very well. If your father was a saint, I will build a cathedral in his name. But if he was the devil I know him to be, I get Wrexham. Deal?" "Deal." She placed her hand in his. This time his grip was like a manacle. "Good," he said, releasing her. "Mrs. Pike will show you to your rooms. We will announce the engagement in the Times tomorrow. You are a fast learner, Duchess. You have just survived your first night." The next 6 weeks were a blur of impossible luxury and cold, sterile isolation. The Tun was in an uproar. The engagement of the ruthless Duke of Windham to the disgraced Ruin Rosier was the only thing anyone spoke of. It was scandalous, it was shocking, and it was the most romantic story of the season. The papers spun a tale of a true love match. The powerful Duke, seeing past the malicious rumors to the true-hearted beauty beneath. Cordelia wanted to laugh, or scream. She was, as promised, untouchable. She was moved into the Rose Suite at Windham House, a vast collection of rooms so opulent they made Lansdowne House look like a hovel. A new wardrobe appeared, courtesy of the real famed Madame Devy, who took her measurements with a mixture of awe and terror, clearly instructed by the Duke to spare no expense. Lady Ashworth, having been revived and informed of her niece's miraculous betrothal, was pensioned off with her husband to a comfortable estate in Somerset. Their gratitude was slobbering, and Cordelia felt a pang of guilt that she was, in effect, selling her soul for their comfort. But she was a prisoner, a beautiful, well-dressed, gilded prisoner. The Duke was absent. He was a creature of shadows and business. They dined together every night at 8, a silent, tense affair over 12 courses in a dining room that could seat 60. He was polite, cold, and exacting. "You will be expected to know the family history," he said one night, pushing a heavy, leather-bound book across the table. "The Valerius line. You will memorize the names of the last 5 duchesses. You will not embarrass me." "And you, Your Grace," she retorted, her courage growing, "will not call me Miss Rosier in front of the staff. It undermines the love match narrative." His lips twitched. "A fair point, Cordelia. He was not cruel to her. He was, transactional. He had upheld his end of the bargain. Now, she had to uphold hers. 2 days after the engagement was announced, he gave her a key. "This is to your father's last lodgings. The lease was paid for by my man. The contents are yours. Find me the ledgers." Cordelia went alone. The rooms were in a shabby, forgotten part of Westminster. They were cold, dusty, and held the faint scent of her father's pipe tobacco. It brought tears to her eyes. She searched for 3 days. She was as meticulous as he had been. She tapped on floorboards, checked behind picture frames, slit the lining of his old trunks. Nothing. On the 3rd day, she was sitting on his small cot, defeated. She looked at his desk. It was an old, heavy piece of furniture. She had already searched every drawer, but she ran her hand along the underside, and her fingers brushed a small, carved indentation, a hidden catch. A small panel sprang open. Inside there was no large, damning ledger. There was only a very small, velvet-covered diary, its clasp secured by a tiny, intricate lock. Tucked beside it was a single painted miniature. Cordelia stared at the miniature. It was not of her mother. It was not of her. It was a painting of a little girl with bright blonde curls and a petulant, spoiled little mouth. A girl she recognized instantly. It was a miniature of a young Honoria Wrexham. Her blood turned to ice. Why would her father, the man supposedly swindled by Lord Wrexham, keep a hidden portrait of his enemy's daughter? She returned to Wyndham House with the small diary. She said nothing of the miniature. She also discovered the other part of the Duke's life. Mrs. Pike, the housekeeper, was a dragon, but she was a dragon with a purpose. She was guarding something. One afternoon, exploring the vast, unused East Wing, Cordelia heard a sound. A piano, being played softly, but with considerable skill. She followed the music to a small, sunny drawing room. A young woman sat at the instrument, her back to the door. She was small and looked incredibly frail, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm day. "Hello?" Cordelia said softly. The music stopped. The girl turned, her face a mask of panic. She was beautiful, with the same harsh, aristocratic bone structure as the Duke, but her eyes were wide and terrified. Who are you?" the girl whispered, clutching her shawl. "I am Cordelia Rosier. I am to marry the Duke." The girl's face softened. "Oh, you are the one. He talks about you." "He does?" Cordelia was stunned. "He says you are not breakable." The girl gave a small, watery smile. "I am Poppy Valerius. I am his sister." Cordelia had not known he had a sister. The girl had never been seen in society. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Lady Poppy." "Oh no, just Poppy." She looked down. I don't go out. I am not... Well, not since the scandal," Cordelia ventured. Poppy nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "My father. And then everything. We were ruined. My own betrothed. He left. He said the Valerius name was poison. Maximilian, your Duke. He brought us back. But he's so angry. All the time." In that moment, Cordelia understood. The Duke's ruthlessness was not for himself. It was not for greed or power. It was armor. It was a fortress he had built around this one, fragile, broken person. His entire obsessive quest to destroy Wrexham was not just about his father's death. It was about his sister's life. That night, at dinner, Cordelia looked at the Duke with new eyes. "I met your sister," she said quietly. He stiffened, his fork halting halfway to his mouth. "She is not to be disturbed. She is lonely, Your Grace, and she is lovely. You are protecting her so fiercely, you are suffocating her." His eyes, which were usually so cold, flashed with a dangerous dark fire. "You will not speak of my sister. You will not go to the East Wing. That is not part of our bargain." "Perhaps it should be," Cordelia said, holding his gaze. "You want me to be your duchess? A duchess is a partner. She is the mistress of the whole house, not just the parts you allow her to see." She stood up, placing her napkin on the table. "I found a diary. It is locked. I believe it is my father's. I will not, however, be opening it alone. I will open it with my partner. Tomorrow. After I have had tea with Poppy." She walked out of the dining room, leaving the Duke of Wyndham, for the first time in his own house, completely and utterly speechless. The next day, Maximilian did not appear. Cordelia, true to her word, went to the East Wing. She found Poppy staring out the window, looking pale and nervous. He will be angry," Poppy whispered as Cordelia sat down. "Yes, he will," Cordelia said, pouring 2 cups of tea. "But he will be angrier if he loses you. And loneliness is a kind of poison, Poppy. Now, tell me what you were playing." It was beautiful. For 2 hours they talked. Cordelia spoke of her own quiet life before the ruin, of her love for books and art. Poppy, shyly at first, then with growing confidence, spoke of her music. She was not a sick invalid, Cordelia realized. She was a young woman suffering from a broken heart and profound agoraphobia, terrified of the world that had been so cruel to her. When Cordelia returned to her own suite, the Duke was waiting for her. He was standing by her fireplace, the small, locked diary in his hand. "You disobeyed me," he stated. "I did," Cordelia replied, refusing to be cowed. "She is your sister, not your prisoner, and I am your fiancé, not your servant. Shall we open this, or would you prefer to glower at me for another hour?" A muscle in his jaw twitched. "The lock is a trifurcation cipher. I've never seen one so complex." Cordelia looked at it. "It's not. It's a double-entry key. It requires 2 things, a date and a word. My father was an accountant, but he was also a romantic. The date will be my mother's birthday. The word—" She paused, then walked to a small satchel. She pulled out the miniature of the young Honoria Wrexham and placed it on the table. The Duke looked at the miniature, then at Cordelia, his eyes narrowing. "Explain." "I found it with the diary. I believe my father and Lord Wrexham were once friends. True friends, before the money, before the company. I think the password is Honoria." The Duke stared at the painting. A strange thing to keep, a reminder of his betrayal. "Or," Cordelia said softly, "a reminder of what was lost." He worked the small dials, the birthday, the name, click. The clasp sprang open. They sat at the table, the small book open between them. The romance of their engagement began not with a kiss, but with the quiet turning of pages, their heads bent together under the light of a single lamp. The first half of the diary was not a ledger. It was a journal. It detailed the friendship between Robert Rosier and Stephen Wrexham. They were 2 ambitious young men. Wrexham was the aristocrat with connections. Rosier was the quiet genius with numbers. They were going to conquer the world together. The miniature was a gift from Wrexham to his dearest friend and brother. He was godfather to Honoria, Cordelia whispered, stunned. "My father." Then the tone of the journal changed. The Bengal Shipping Company was formed. The Duke's father invested. The money poured in. And then the entries became afraid. January 10th. "Stephen is moving too fast. He's leveraging assets we don't have. He's promising returns that are mathematically impossible. He will not listen to me." February 2nd. God help me. It is not just ambitious. It is criminal. He is running a shell game. He is creating false shipping manifests. He is siphoning money. I confronted him. He laughed. He said this is how empires are built. March 1st. I have begun a new ledger, a true one. I am hiding it. I am tracking every penny he steals. He is moving money to a private account in Switzerland. Switzerland, the Duke said, his voice a low growl. Untouchable. March 15th. He is blackmailing Wyndham. My God. The Duke has a private vice, a fondness for the gaming halls in Paris. Wrexham found out. He is using the company to pay the Duke's debts, and in exchange the Duke signs off on whatever Wrexham puts in front of him. Wyndham is trapped. He is a good man, but a weak one. The Duke's face was pale stone. His father was not just a fool. He was a compromised one. April 5th. I cannot be party to this. I have tried to warn Wyndham. He is too afraid. I have compiled the evidence. I will present it to the board myself. I am transferring the true ledger into a cipher. A new book. Tomorrow. April 7th. Stephen knows. I don't know how, but he knows. He came to me. He offered me half. Half. To just be quiet. I refused. His eyes. He is not my friend anymore. April 9th. I fear for my life, and for my sea. I have hidden the true ledger. The key is in my heart. I will go to the authorities. May God protect me. It was the last entry. Cordelia looked up, tears streaming down her face. He was a whistleblower. He wasn't a thief. He was trying to stop Wrexham. Maximilian was silent. He walked to the window and stared out at the dark garden. My father's suicide, he said, his back to her. It was dated April 10th, the day after your father's last entry, the day the scandal broke. Wrexham. He released the story, named them both as co-conspirators, and framed my father and yours. With your father gone, and mine dead. There was no one left to refute the story. My father didn't go. He was murdered, Cordelia said, the horrible truth landing on her. Wrexham killed him. And he killed your father, as surely as if he'd held the pistol himself. The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clock. The bargain they had made was built on a foundation of lies. The Duke's quest for revenge and Cordelia's quest for her father's innocence were now the same. He wrote in the journal that he hid the true ledger, Maximilian said, turning. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. The cipher, the book that proves everything, the Swiss accounts, the blackmail. The key is in my heart. My mother, Cordelia whispered. No, not my mother. Me. My sea. He meant me. She stood up and walked to her dressing table, the Duke following her. She picked up the silver locket her mother had given her, the one she had clutched at the ball. This was my father's wedding gift to my mother. She gave it to me. It's a locket, the Duke said, confused. My father was meticulous. He loved puzzles. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp. She didn't open it. She twisted the frame. A tiny, clicking sound. The back of the locket fell away, revealing not a picture, but a minuscule, tightly wound scroll of paper. This is the key, Cordelia said, unrolling it. It was covered in symbols and numbers. It's the cipher key for the real ledger. But the ledger itself, Maximilian asked. Where is it? Cordelia looked at the empty desk, the trunks, the bare walls of her father's cold apartment. Where would a meticulous man hide his most important document? He wouldn't write in it, she said, thinking aloud. He would use it. A book. The key is in my heart. Not C for Cordelia. C for classics. His favorite book, the one he taught me to read from. She rushed to the small bookshelf in her own sitting room, a relic from her past life. She pulled out a worn, leather-bound copy of Plutarch's Lives. The cipher key. "It's a page and line code," she said, her hands shaking as she cross-referenced the scroll with the book. The Duke watched, his expression unreadable, as she began to transcribe the tiny, coded annotations from the margins of Plutarch. It was all there: dates, amounts, account numbers, a direct line from the Bengal Shipping Company to Lord Wrexham to a bank in Geneva. "We have him," Maximilian said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "We have him, stone cold." "We have him," Cordelia agreed. She looked up at him, not as a prisoner, but as a partner. "The question is, Your Grace, what is the most public, most devastating way to use it?" The Duke smiled. It was the first real smile she had ever seen on his face. It was the smile of the wolf, just before the kill. "The season is not yet over," he said, "and the Devonshire House Ball is in 2 weeks. The Devonshire House Ball was not just an event. It was the apex of the London season. It was where the true powers of the empire, statesmen, ambassadors, and the oldest, wealthiest families, convened. It was, in short, the perfect place for an execution. In the 2 weeks prior, a subtle change had occurred at Wyndham House. The Duke and Cordelia were inseparable. They were not seen walking in the park. They were in the study, night after night, with their heads bent together. They were no longer prisoner and warden. They were partners, Wyndham and his Duchess. Cordelia, for her part, had also tended to Poppy. She had coaxed her out of the East Wing, first into the gardens, then into a closed carriage. The fear that had fueled the Duke's rage was being replaced by Cordelia's quiet, steady care, and Maximilian noted it with a deep, unspoken gratitude. The night of the ball arrived. When Cordelia descended the grand staircase, Maximilian was waiting. He was in formal court dress, dark blue velvet, with the glittering stars of his orders. He looked like the god of power and vengeance he was. He was holding a box. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a river of diamonds and emeralds, the legendary Wyndham emeralds. "They are armor," he said, his voice low. "I know," she replied. He fastened the clasp, his fingers brushing the nape of her neck. The touch was not impersonal. It was warm. When the Duke and his new, beautiful Duchess were announced, the entire ballroom paused to look. Cordelia was no longer the girl in the mended lemon silk. She was a vision in emerald green velvet, armored in diamonds. She met the Ton's stairs, her head held high, her hand resting confidently on the Duke's arm. They saw Wrexham across the room. He was holding court, laughing, his face ruddy with wine and success. Honoria was beside him, preening in white satin, celebrating her new engagement to a minor German prince. Honoria saw them first. Her smile faltered. She whispered to her father. Lord Wrexham turned. He saw the Duke of Wyndham, and he saw the woman on his arm. His smile did not falter, but his eyes, Cordelia noted, went flat. The predator sensed the trap. The Duke did not move toward him. That was not the plan. Instead, he guided Cordelia toward a small, quiet alcove where a group of the most powerful men in England were gathered. The Duke of Wellington was there, old and imposing. Lord Melbourne, the Prime Minister, was beside him, and with them were the heads of Barings Bank and the East India Company. "Your Grace," Wellington nodded to Wyndham. "A bold move, that. Marrying the Rosier girl. Half the ton thinks you're mad." "And the other half, Duke," Maximilian said, "thinks I am a romantic. They are both wrong. I am simply a man of business." He produced a slim leather portfolio. He had not brought Plutarch's Lives. He had brought clean, concise, hand-copied pages translated from the cipher. "Gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting your evening, but I have a business matter that simply cannot wait. It concerns the late Bengal Shipping Company and the current vast fortune of Lord Wrexham." The air in the alcove turned to ice. "That is an old, dead matter," the head of Baring's Bank said uneasily. "Is it?" Maximilian said, opening the portfolio. "Here is an account number for a bank in Geneva. Here is a transfer of funds, dated the day after my father's death. And here is a direct, traceable line of blackmail payments from Lord Wrexham to a certain gaming hell in Paris on my father's behalf." Lord Melbourne, no longer bored, looked at the papers. "Good God, Wyndham, is this real?" "It is," Cordelia said, her voice clear and strong. The men turned, surprised to hear her speak. "It is from my father's personal ledger. He was murdered by Lord Wrexham to silence him, just as your Grace's father," she nodded to Maximilian, "was driven to his death by these schemes." Wellington looked at the papers, his old sharp eyes scanning the figures. His face was granite. The small group of men turned, as one, and began to walk, very slowly, toward the center of the ballroom, toward Lord Wrexham. Wrexham saw them coming. He saw the Duke of Wellington's face. He saw Lord Melbourne's fury. The music didn't stop. The dancing didn't cease. But a small circle of silence formed around Wrexham. They did not accuse him. They did not shout. They simply stood. They presented the papers. Lord Wrexham looked at the documents. He looked at Maximilian, who stood 10 feet away, watching, and he looked at Cordelia. He knew he was finished. It was not a legal ruin, not yet. It was a social and financial one. The city would close to him by morning. His credit would be gone by noon. The prince's family would retract the engagement by evening. Honoria saw it. She saw her father's face crumble. She saw the life she had built, the one she had killed for, disintegrate. Her hatred found its target. She ran at Cordelia, her face a mask of primal hatred. You gutter rat! You did this!" She raised her hand to slap her, or perhaps to tear at the emeralds. She never had the chance. Maximilian caught her wrist in a grip of iron, stopping her mid-swing. He did not twist it. He just held it. "You are," he said, his voice bored. "No longer relevant, Lady Honoria." He released her, and she stumbled back, her fury collapsing into a pathetic, desperate sob. She had been humiliated. But this time, there was no mended dress. There was only the cold, hard truth. Lord Wrexham, a broken old man, turned and walked from the ballroom. Honoria, weeping, followed him. It was over. A quiet sigh seemed to pass through the room. The music swelled. Maximilian turned to Cordelia. The fire of his 15-year vengeance was gone. In its place was something else. Something quiet. Something deep. He looked at her. Truly looked at her. Not as a key, not as a partner in a contract, not as a duchess. He looked at her as Cordelia. He was a good man, Maximilian said, his voice rough. "Your father, I will see his name cleared. I will build that cathedral." "No," Cordelia said, placing her hand on his arm. The emeralds were cold against his velvet. "We will build it together." He held her gaze, and a slow, genuine smile touched his lips. He offered his arm. "Cordelia Valerius," he said, testing the name. "The Duchess of Wyndham. May I have this dance?" "You may, Your Grace," she replied, her hand sliding into his. "You may." He led her onto the floor, and for the first time, it was not a transaction. It was not a contract. it was a beginning. The story of Cordelia and the Duke of Wyndham isn't just a romance. It's a reminder that the deepest humiliations can forge the strongest wills. They found justice not in the ballrooms, but in the truth they unearthed together. They were two broken people, bound by a contract, who found in each other a partner not just for revenge, but for life. But what happens after the villain is vanquished? What happens when the Wolf of Wyndham must learn to be a husband, and the girl in the mended dress must learn to be a duchess? Their story is far from over. If you were captivated by their fight for justice and their slow burn romance, please show your support. Like this video, share it with a fellow story lover who enjoys tales of drama and twists, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Your support means we can bring more of these dramatic tales to life. Comment below, what part of the Duke's icy bargain shocked you the most?